I will kick off this part of the morning. Good morning to anybody who is just joining us now for the educational part of today. If you're here from home or from the office, you know that we were not able to make it over to the chalet today, and I think that was a good call for everyone's, safety and just logistics on the home front. But we're here making it happen on Zoom. We're lucky enough to be joined by Paige Ahlborg and Chuck Hanna to give us our forum presentation. And thank you to Gail Nozal for kind of organizing these speakers and this session. So this is going to be about tree trenches and bioretention of stormwater. And Chuck and Paige will be telling you all about it. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to them. Just one other quick note, we do always post the recordings of the forums on our YouTube page. Oh, no, that was a direct message to Valerie, everyone. And then, of course, they'll be posted in the MnSTAC newsletter. We'll see how long it takes for the recordings to get processed and then downloaded, and we process them. So if they're not in next Monday's newsletter, they'll definitely be in the following. So Paige, Chuck, thanks so much for presenting today. I will go ahead and throw it over to you.
Hi, I'm Chuck Hanna with Davey Resource Group in St. Paul. We've been in St. Paul for about the past 20 years. Our focus has been sort of an urban core, stormwater, and restoration. We've done work all over the state, but the vast majority of our work is definitely in the Minneapolis-St. Paul, inside sort of the 694, 494 loop. So we do a lot of green infrastructure design build. And as things have changed over the last few years, we've sort of adapted new projects, new designs, new infrastructure. One of the ones we're really excited about are tree trenches. There's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of work in the design. There's a lot of you see a lot of ways to expand the tree trench in the environment. The nice thing is it does allow us to introduce trees into a really heavily dense urban core area. I'm going to share my screen. Paige, do you want to introduce yourself or you want to wait until you jump in?
No, I can do that now quick. So
okay.
I'm Paige Ahlborg with the Ramsey, Washington Metro Watershed Districts. I was just going through the participant list. I see a few names I recognize, but yeah, I'll give a little bit more of an intro to watershed districts and what we do after Chuck gives his talk.
Okay. I am trying to open the presentation. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Yeah, today we are going to talk, tree trenches. My assumption in this is everybody is somewhat familiar with the tree trenches, and the concept of the tree trench, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail, but not so much engineering in such depth. So we're going to try and touch all the key elements. We're going to try and touch, uses, and then show a few examples of different projects that we've done, and then Paige will be doing some of the projects and stuff that she's worked on. And as I mentioned, things have changed a lot, especially in parking code and spaces and stuff, that we're finding more opportunities to take portions of parking lots, take portions of hardscape, and turning it into green infrastructure. Cities, Minneapolis is a good example, St. Paul is a good example, Buffalo, New York, Portland, where they've changed the parking code dramatically. And a lot of these infrastructure projects are going in to deal with stormwater, to deal with urban forestry, to deal with everything else in place of parking and in place of asphalt. So we know, trees are a critical portion of the healthy environment. I'm going to close that down. Sorry. Trees are you guys all know about trees, so they're an important part of the element. They're also a very important part of stormwater for us, because most of our infrastructure is a vegetated product. In the end, we don't do a lot of pipe work. We don't do a lot of retention ponds, stuff like that. Most of our work is actually a vegetated product in the end. And I'm having a hard time getting this to move forward. There we go. For some reason, it's just acting slow. The situation we run into, like I said, we've been able to take asphalt areas, parking lots, stuff like that, and convert it. Not all trees work. Not all sites are really designed for trees. These are pictures from Minneapolis, from the metro area. The top picture shows, they're shoving a tree into a nice little parking lot island there, and the roots have actually grown up and underneath the asphalt. That's a project that, we hope to work on in a few years here, but you can see we've dotted it out. This will be a tree trench project. The other one is just your typical Minneapolis, tree tucked into that little 5-foot bed, and with heavy wind, it blew and raised the sidewalk. So they don't always work. And what we want to do is introduce more and more of the trees into the environment. Some of the benefits, not all the benefits, but some of the benefits from the tree trenches, it is a bioretention practice. Therefore, our focus is primarily stormwater. They're almost always vegetated. The nice thing is we can do either infiltration and deal with stormwater runoff, and we can make these fit into the urban environment. So, the benefits they do a fantastic job of managing stormwater on the site. We get cooling in the parking lot, air quality is improved, habitat. And we like to try, with Davey Resource, when we're doing a design and stuff, we're trying to give it a sense of community. So a lot of our tree trenches are actually introduced into spaces that the community can use. So we've converted, and we'll show some of those samples shortly. But we don't just, we want to bring these in and get that community sense growing. Sorry, I am having trouble getting it changing. I might have to shrink this down since it's not letting. There we go. I apologize. For some reason, it's not letting me flip the page. There's several types of ways to use a tree trench. These are some quick schematics for them. They all have the same basic elements. We'll touch on that shortly. But you can introduce them into, with a hardscape over a permeable paver. Quite often we're sending rooftop runoff into these trenches. Other times it's just sheet feeding off a parking lot. And we've actually done vegetative swales that have run into parking lots that now run directly into the tree trenches. Couple of the key elements that they have, you've always got a tree. We have these structural components, and I'll be showing samples of that. We actually have soils, engineered soils, to help with the infiltration or the filtration of the project. Up above, we always have some sort of a hard surface, or as I said, we started working more and more on vegetative surfaces. But they also always have, and it doesn't show it very well, there's almost always an under drain. The 4 elements that we really want to talk about, the inlet, which is either pipe, sheet feeding, or permeable pavers. The engineered soils, here again, an example of the engineered soils. The support structures, we'll talk about that briefly. And then always in this environment, there's very few tree trenches that don't go with some sort of an under drain system to make sure that we can control that amount of runoff that's in there. We don't want it to become a saturated cattail pond. So inlet, again, 4 basic type of inlet. One is to pipe it. That's probably, honestly, the most common. if you're taking rooftop runoff, we'll pipe that directly in and then have it feed through drain tile into a system so it's evenly dispersed throughout the tree trench. That is, we'll also from the back of a catch basin as an overflow in a catch basin, we'll send water in that way. Tree grates, we've seen these on the Nicolet Mall. We've seen these out in front of the convention center that they have tree trenches on both locations. And this is primarily how they're getting the water in. It's just each tree trench is a little pocket tree trench underneath, and they're feeding in through the tree grate. Sheet feeding is exactly as it says. We're taking a larger area, such as a parking lot, and we're just letting it run over. And again, we want to try and disperse that water evenly. So this would be somewhere where we graded the parking lot, put in the final grade, and we're evenly sheet feeding that water into a tree trench. We almost always try the best we can on tree grade sheet feeding and then permeable surfaces to get that inlet so we have some pre-treatment. One of the biggest failures on this, like any stormwater green infrastructure, is sediment buildup. Coming off a parking lot, we're in Minnesota throughout the day, they're out throwing down sand and salt and whatever else they need to deal with the snow. We always want to try and get something to trap that before it gets into any green infrastructure. So pre-treatment is a big topic. I think Paige might have a few examples of that. I didn't want to go too much into detail on that, but we want to keep those elements of sand, grit, salt, heavy metals, petroleum as much as we can out of the system. Last but not least, permeable pavers are becoming more and more common over these tree trenches, and they would be tucked right underneath the system. And again, we're looking for that even flow into the tree trench. So that's inlet. The other thing, the most key element to any tree trench is actually the soils. The soils are the filter media. These are, tree trenches can be built or constructed with any type of soil in reality, but generally we want soils that are, have a little bit of filtration. We don't want them to become saturated, so we don't want a heavy clay in there. We may tuck the lining or something with heavy clay, but almost all of these are engineered soils. And to engineer the soil, there's the Swedish soil, which is a combination of peat and sand, black dirt, and gravel. Again, it's designed to allow for filtration, to keep that water, to hold it long enough for the tree to uptake the water, and then the excess is filtered and cleaned through the soils and through the roots before it goes out the under drain and on either into daylighted into an open area, or more often than not, we're seeing them connected directly to the stormwater sewer. So we're trapping what we can, we're cleaning the rest and sending it downstream. The other really important thing about the soils is they're a part of the structural component that holds this whole system together. They are key. Just the construction, this is really the weight-bearing portion of the project. So it ties in really tightly with the structural support. There's several different kinds of structural support. Some don't have these chambers in it. These are stacked together. They're a plastic chamber. You see the first phase there. You see it all wrapped together with geotextile in that lower left-hand corner. This is the support, and once you put the soil in there, you actually have a much stronger support system to put up whatever layer you want on top. Again, pavers, concrete, asphalt, and then the tree trench would be open in the middle to allow for the tree to grow. We usually see, more often than not, there's about a 6 to 8 inch void right at the top of those chambers to hold the big flush of stormwater that's coming in. But again, they're each designed separately, and then inside we blow in the engineered soil, so it goes in there and there's no compaction. This is all set on a rock face, an open graded rock face, similar to like a permeable paver system, if you're familiar with that. The option here is, or the purpose here with, again, the soils and the structure, it gives us a base to work on for whatever type of surface we want. It's all tied together. It's one unit. And then it supports that tree growth. And we've actually done trees, perennials, many things in here as well. The underdrain, it's not a real fancy picture. It's just a pipe. It's just a drain tile pipe that sits either at the bottom or in the middle of the soil to control that drainage. Again, what we don't want to do is, for in a heavy soil situation, we don't want to take that water and have it trapped in there, where we've actually seen one that has cattails in it. The water is stuck in that system. We want to make sure that water is moving out through evapotranspiration, through evaporation, or it's filtered and cleaned and sent down the road. The last thing we want to see, and especially in the metro area, where we're doing a lot of these and we have heavier soils, it literally will create a bathtub. And if we have repeated rains or spring thaws where the water is sitting in there, we're actually degrading that soil. We're actually creating a worse situation than if we just done a rain garden or something and sent it down. So to prevent that, we keep the water moving through, again, filtered and sent through the system out of an under drain, which again is just a drain tile pipe. We put gate valves on them, so we're monitoring these systems constantly for the first few years, and we leave them open, and then we adjust the flow rate as it comes out through the gate valve. If they're working and they're functioning great, we may shut that down to 75% or to 25%, 75%. It all depends on the situation and how well the trees and vegetation are handling it. Those are, again, the key, very, very key elements of a rain garden. We have the underdrain, again, the support structures, the soils, and the inlet. The vegetative portion, again, can be an option. One example we have here, we did the Maplewood Community Center in 2019. These are the before pictures, please. We met with the YMCA in 2018, who was managing the Maplewood Community Center. They had several issues on this site. One, obviously, is aesthetics. The other was they had an ADA accessibility issue with the ramp not being to code. It was never to code. Going back to that, they wanted usable spaces outside because they had a theater inside. So they gave us that. And to be honest, it was just an area for smokers to go outside was their biggest concern. Drainage was a big issue because their entire rooftop was coming out of scuppers and dumping directly on these sidewalks. And that's the reason, between that and salt, that we have so much deterioration on the retaining wall block. The other issues they had were parking and lighting. We couldn't take up any more parking because they were already at sort of their minimal parking area. So we spent a lot of time looking, going back and forth. Ultimately, we ended up doing several different things on this, but today we're looking at the tree trenching. So our first concern, obviously, was improving the access to the building. Our second concern, and these were shuffled from their concerns, were control of the stormwater and the runoff. Third was the usable spaces and trying to limit the smokers gathering in front. And so we did a little hostile landscaping design from that. And then for the lighting, we actually decided to forego their lighting because they had enough existing lighting. We did a little bit of path lighting, but we used the borrowed lighting to save money on the cost. And we changed everything out to LED for them. So here's the beginning. Creation of, we demoed the entire site, the entire front of the building. Here's the early stages. We're about 20% into the tree trench. Here's the tree trench going along the sidewalk out in front. In this back side right here, there's actually another row of chambers in there. And this handicap ramp here, if you can see my cursor, is actually half of this is directly over the tree trench. All the water that's going into the tree trench is either off of this ramp or it's directly piped from the rooftop runoff. We tied into the scuppers. We put under drains into it. So we're not taking any surface water into this other than the handicap ramp to a channel drain. The advantage to taking the rooftop was we dealt with their drainage issue by reducing the amount of runoff that came in. But it's coming off of a white vinyl roof, which is a huge plus for us. That puts pretty clean water directly into the stormwater system. Now we don't need to worry as much about that parking lot runoff or the grit or the sediment or the buildup, because again, it's coming off a white vinyl roof. You get a little bit of dust, you get a little bit of dirt, but it's so much more minimal than a parking lot runoff. And then you can see we planted this site. Originally, this was going to be a plaza, but to save cost, we actually put a planting bed directly over that system. And today it's full of prairie drop seed, three maple trees are all we had space for on this, dwarf bush honeysuckle, and it's a mini monoculture prairie there. So we dealt with all of their issues, but we would not have been able to deal with any of that stormwater if we had not done the tree trench, because we needed our ramp. We needed to tie in all of their entrances. And the only true option, or the best option we really have besides the detention tank, was a tree trench here. The other one that we are going to look at quickly, this is another sample of, we did a combination of sites here. This is a permeable system. It's Hamlin Church in St. Paul. We're allowed to take 16 parking spots, this alleyway, this sidewalk, all of this hardscape, and convert it into a greenway, which is shared by Hamlin University and Hamlin Church. We have a tree trench along the sidewalk. We have permeable pavers under here that have tree trenches in it. And this is an example you can see in this lower corner again. We're bringing rooftop runoff into a rain garden. Our tree trenches are first attacked. Our overflows all go into a series of rain gardens and then out to the street. This was a site, I wish we had more construction photos on this, but it just sort of happened so quickly with the demo and everything, we didn't have them. But the tree trench goes under this patio here, and then under this sidewalk here, out to this patio. So again, we're trapping it, and then we planted birch trees, maple trees. So this is an example of more of a swale, but with the chambers tucked off to the side. And that's sort of a basic bare bones tree trench glass. And I want to thank Capital Region, Ramsey, Washington have been great supporting us, City of St. Paul. We have a lot of people when we work on these that contribute. Biggest thing is they find us space. And as I mentioned early on, as things are changing in parking code and space, we're seeing more and more of these opportunities opening up. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Paige.
All right, thank you, Chuck. Now I will share. All right, so you can see my shared screen and not my notes, right?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, thanks, Chuck. That was a good intro into all the background and details of tree trenches. He is definitely more of the expert on that. I just get to handle offering grant dollars and finding spots for these projects, which is fun. So I will focus on two big projects that we've worked on recently, and then touch on one other area just very briefly that we have installed tree trenches. So just to familiarize everyone with our watershed district, we cover about 62 square miles of the Northeast Metro. So we cover the east side of St. Paul and all the way starting up in Shoreview. I don't know if you can see the purple area up in the northwest area of the map, all the way down to the east side or the west side of Woodbury. So that's where we get our name, Ramsey, Washington. We cover both parts of those two counties. So we're all, or parts of 12 cities, always looking for partnerships within those cities, whether it's public or private partners. Watershed district goals are set at state level. We have water quality goals, pollutant reduction, total phosphorus and sediment are the main pollutants we're looking at removing, and protecting those water bodies. We have reports that we have to send to the pollution control agency every year, and then just internal goals we're trying to meet. So I'm going to talk with you about our retrofit projects, and I have the two currently installed projects in red, North St. Paul Target and the Target on Suburban Avenue on the east side of St. Paul are constructed, and then we're working on the Woodbury store off Valley Creek Road. So I'll touch on our retrofit program and why we are working with Target stores. So Ramsey, Washington Metro Watershed District, as most Metro Watershed districts, we have various programs. We have our natural resource program, we have education program, we have water quality, we have our permit program, and our stewardship grant program. So our permit program and the grant program are the ways that we pretty much meet those goals that we're trying to meet for water quality standards. With our permit program, developers are required to put in some type of stormwater management, infiltration or filtration measures, but those we were finding are not enough to meet the goals that we are setting out to meet. So in 2006, our Watershed District Board established our stewardship grant program, or a cost share program, where we offer funds to projects like the YMCA that Chuck just told you about, to install best management practices. And we help with the design, we help review, help with construction oversight, whatever is needed. And then obviously funding source as well. But then we also found that was not enough. So we started our targeted retrofit program in 2012. And at first that was started through some Clean Water Fund grants. And we focused on churches and schools. And then eventually, when we captured all of those low-hanging fruits, our focus there was to install more cost beneficial practices. Usually those are rain gardens or infiltration basins in existing open space, which churches and schools are great for. But now, obviously, you guys know, covering part of St. Paul and a lot of other urban areas, we're running out of those green spaces that can be used for stormwater treatment. So we've now, with working with commercial sites, looked for more opportunities to install things such as tree trenches. And most of these projects go in with district funding and then clean water funds when those are available. Our work with Target Corporation started, I think, in 2018. I was able to connect with someone out there at they have a stormwater division, which deals with stormwater practices on all the Metro stores, all stores across the nation. But we were able to connect with the local person and figure out, what are Target's green initiative goals. We visited some other projects, Maplewood Mall, that I'll touch on at the end of my talk here. We visited that area just to show how these best management practices can be incorporated into a completely impervious area. So we visited these, other areas, showed how successful they can be, how we work with, their maintenance needs, their traffic control, how traffic, guests get around, things like that. And then, obviously wanted to know what their constraints are. What else do we need to work around? With Target, it was things, access agreements were big. We had to make sure we were in line with all of their protocols, and then making sure we can meet their construction windows. So just touching on a few, I'm not going to get into this in a lot of detail, but we had a lot of phases, specifically with working with Target. The one good thing, well, there were a lot of good things about working with them, but thankfully their corporate offices are located in the metro. So it was easy to get in touch with people. The hardest part of all of this was that our East St. Paul store, that project was set to be constructed May 2020. Obviously, spring of 2020 did not go as planned for the entire world. So we had to quickly adapt to our new online electronic world. You know, as you all know, things weren't that easy right away, and working with Target was no exception. I mean, we had to jump through a lot of hoops. You know, they had a lot of things that had to be signed by multiple people. And at that time, it was all, they needed hand signatures. So we had to wait extra amount of time while people weren't going into the office, and they had to wait a week or two before everyone could get in to sign things. Eventually that got better. But we, along the way, everyone was flexible. We made it work, had lots of touch-in points as we developed the concept plans, did survey work, soil borings, kept Target in the loop on everything, so that they felt comfortable, with us taking the lead on this. We were doing the design work, working with bioengineering to do that, and just wanted to make sure that Target was comfortable with all that. These are the tree trench details. I'm not going to get into that since Chuck went over that, but if anyone is interested in seeing those or the full plan set, let me know and I can send you that separately. But just wanted to highlight all of the communication that we had, the back and forth, redesigns, things like that, that kept the process moving forward for both stores. Now, the fun part, the actual install. So for the East St. Paul Target, actually for both stores, when we started, our direction from Target was we cannot lose any parking stalls whatsoever, which obviously was a hindrance on us. We are always looking for ways to reduce impervious surface. You go to most malls and Targets, and they're designed for Black Friday shopping, maybe a few other busy weekends throughout the year. So you go out there much of the time and these spots are open, just wasted impervious area. So we were a little disappointed to hear about that no loss of parking. However, we were very glad that Target was on board with the tree trenches. And at first we looked at several tree trench and then underground storage options. We use underground a lot, and we're seeing it more just because we, people can't give up parking spaces, or they need to be put in street right-of-ways where there's utility issues and other conflicts. But they're out of sight. You don't get that educational benefit. Nobody's learning from that underground system. A lot of the times they get forgotten about. The person who agrees to take on maintenance leaves for another job, and it gets lost in the process. So eventually, for some reason, Target turned around, probably around the third or fourth redesign we had, and said, hey, we're willing to give up parking spaces. We don't need all these. We have plenty even for the busiest shopping days. So that was very exciting. So with the East St. Paul store, we still kept in one large tree trench. You can see it there highlighted in blue, spanning a long width of the parking lot. And then we installed 7 rain gardens. One was in an existing green space, and kind of nice. It's kind of hard to see, but I guess the southwest portion of that map there, that was an existing green space and actually used for employee breaks. They had picnic tables set up in that area. So now kind of nice to have that garden there for people to break around. And then the rest of them set back in the spots that few people want to park around, right? We looked at to design where these go, looked at how drainage can be captured, where the tree trenches, we actually capture quite a bit of drainage, just given the parking lot layout. But Target, obviously, when I go to Target, I like to have the close parking spots. I'm sure most of you do as well. So they were hesitant to give up close parking spots, which is fine. That's what the tree trenches are for. And then those back rain gardens capture the rest, everything else that drains off the parking lot. So it majority of the parking lot gets filtered through these rain gardens. You know, and add the benefit of the native plants in there. We have in all the rain gardens an iron enhanced sand trench. So that just uses iron filings within the rain garden media to help bind phosphorus. It's just another way to remove phosphorus from that stormwater, which is one of the pollutants we're trying to get rid of. So let's see, I think that's all I want to go into there. Obviously, Target was aware of the other benefits of tree trenches and having trees in the parking lot that Chuck went over. So it was easy to convince them that this would be a good addition to their parking lot. Here's a few pictures after the install. For East St. Paul, we removed 36 parking spaces to install those rain gardens. Some of them were previously small island areas, so it didn't require a parking lot reduction, but we were able to remove that amount of impervious surface and replace with filtration basins. All the rain gardens, just like the tree trenches, have drain tile in them just because it's not the best soil out there, highly compacted, and we don't want any issues with standing water. We want to make sure that that water has a chance to filter through the media, but also has a chance to get out, so we don't have any flooding concerns within the parking lot. We capture runoff from 3.2 acres of impervious surface and capture runoff from 54% of the pavement area. The North St. Paul Target store is located off McKnight and 36. And I should start by saying these are the three Target stores I'm highlighting are the three stores that are in our watershed district. That's why they were selected. And as part of our program with these targeted retrofit projects, our goal is to work with partners that have multiple locations so that we can spread that partnership around. So here we installed 2 tree trenches and then 4 rain gardens, and one was in an existing, this large one down here, rain garden 4 was in an existing green space. And then 3 of them, we were able to remove parking stalls to install those gardens. Having that slow transfer like Chuck was experiencing. So here we were able to remove 50 parking stalls, which was great. Again, a big shock from going from 0 to 50. And I love these pictures. These, I don't know why we're really good at taking during construction photos, but not so great at taking post construction photos. So I was happy our communication person actually went out and caught some of these photos of these gardens. You know, when we install these, we use native plants. And one of the benefits we tell people is we're getting those pollinator friendly plants in, but it's still a parking lot. We don't expect to see bees or other pollinators as we would in maybe a native prairie somewhere. But I'm surprised every time I go out to check on things here, there are just an amazing number of bees and other pollinators circling the lot. So it's super fun to see that part of it, as well as getting the stormwater benefit here. So we're capturing 4 acres of impervious surface, and 36% of the site is captured with these. And then here you can see our the tree trench, or the tree trench here. After it's installed, we have the great, I think I have a few, hopefully some better pictures. I let Chuck handle most of that. But in all of ours, we put these fencing, like metal fencing around them to help protect the trees. And I'll show you, it doesn't always do the trick, but we're trying to keep people from driving in. And then hard to see here, but there is a curb stop that prevents cars from driving in there. Tree species we selected. You guys obviously know a lot more about these than I do, but we use heritage oak, swamp white oak, St. Croix elm, discovery elm, and autumn blaze maple. Just selected mainly because they're tough. We need resilient species able to withstand periods of dry conditions, hot, you know, they're all in asphalt, like it's very hot. So trees that can handle that. And also stand having pretty wet roots while if we get heavy rains and while that water is standing in that trench before it drains out. after those storm events, and then able to handle the kind of confined root growing conditions. We want trees that are relatively fast growing, also pretty salt tolerant. We do have, I don't have a good picture of the sump, but Chuck mentioned the use of pre-treatment. So in all of our systems, we use a sump manhole that acts as pre-treatment and then can easily be cleaned out, and just keep some of that material from getting into the actually where the root base is and where the trees are. But it's hard to do with salt. So in all the parking lots obviously use salt. So want trees that can handle that. And then also look for species that have lower maintenance needs. Looking at the way the branches grow, the leaf drop. You don't want trees that will inhibit where people can park, or maybe require a lot of pruning. And we did go through, again, a series of tree planting at Maplewood Mall. So where we did, I think originally we had 10 species out there. And after 5 to 10 years, we were able to see which species, worked well out there and which didn't. So we're able to base our selection off of kind of our trials and failures out there. Let's see. Oh yeah, so this one I just wanted to put in to show that no matter what steps we took, we had people drive into the trees. I couldn't find a picture. We have people also drive into the grates after the trees were installed. It's just going to happen, as one rep from Target said, they're in a hurry, they are going to miss things. So we did our best, and you just can't help sometimes what people are going to do. But so we did, eventually we had fencing all around the grates there, even with the curb. That didn't stop this nice little red car. But hopefully, once the tree grates are installed, that provides a little more protection for the tree. I don't know that we've had any trees damaged. I think most of them were thankfully a dead tree that was hit at a different site, but we're doing what we can to make them more visible. So specifically at Target, the construction phasing and traffic control was a big consideration. There were obviously a lot of people coming and going throughout Target, especially 2020, 2021, I'm blanking on what it's called, but where you drive up, Instacart type pickup was more active. So people were literally driving in, for quick visits, picking up what they needed and getting out of there. So we had to maintain traffic flow easily for all the guests. And the contractors we worked with were familiar with all of those restrictions. We had phasing, so we, didn't open up the entire parking lot at once, but change that to accommodate for delivering and parking access throughout the project. We had construction start dates that were set by Target. That was a little more flexible and just mainly depended on the contractor schedule. But then we also had to accommodate, Target's busy time, back to school, and then holiday shopping were the big milestones that we needed to wrap up construction by. And for the most part, we were able to meet those. 2020, we had a little bit more rain than 2021. So obviously delays and whatnot put things back. But for the most part, I think we kept everyone happy and allowed them to get in and out of the store easily. So now these projects are constructed. What happens next for all of our targeted retrofit projects? We factor in a 2-year maintenance contract. So I should have said, all these projects are funded by the Watershed District, and then we fund 2 years of maintenance. We want to make sure that everything's working properly with those filtration basins. The trees are fine. A lot of times we'll see failure with the trees within that first year, maybe the second year. So if they're not going to make it, we want to get them replaced so that we can get something healthy in there for the property owners, so that they have a thriving project once they take over that maintenance. And then we, for all of our sites and specifically for the targets, we develop operation and maintenance manuals. to give to the property owners. So they know what they need to do. They're aware of this early on. We talk about maintenance up front. We want to make sure that they can handle it, that it works with all of their existing finances and maintenance staff, or if they are going to hire someone, that we are able to provide suggestions for who they could hire for that. And so for Target, the East St. Paul store, we've completed our 2 years of maintenance. So Target will be taking over that next year. And we've already had plenty of conversations about that. So I feel comfortable with them taking that over. And then North St. Paul will be handed over to them in 2024. And then signage is one thing we always want to have on these big projects so that people are aware of what's going on. Give kudos to the property owner for taking these steps and putting these in, and also to get our name out there. Most people don't know what a watershed district is or know that we have these funding opportunities available. So we want to make sure that we spread the word on that. And then obviously if Clean Water Fund dollars are used, make sure that we're showcasing that logo as well to highlight where those funds are going. And then I mentioned Maplewood Mall. These are some older pictures, but if anyone's been out there, you've probably noticed all of the trees that are out there. They have the tree grates that I showed you before, same curb stop. And then it's really hard to see on this picture, but the blue banner on those are ones that we want to put in Target as well, but it just says one of 300 trees that helps clean rainwater. So we have those scattered throughout the parking lot, but just a great way. I love this picture with all the vehicles showing that there's no loss of parking. People can park right up against them. And it's a great practice to have available for urban areas that can't give up parking spaces. So if anyone has not been out to Maplewood Mall, check those out. We did do a big tree replacement. We had some die off. So it was a 5-year phased project starting in 2009, I believe. So we had various die-offs throughout the project and had to do some big replacements about 4 years ago. And unfortunately, we found a lot of the die-off was because the trees were installed incorrectly. So yeah, just for various reasons, they were too high, too low. Things that we know to watch for now, and unfortunately found out the expensive way with that replacement. But yeah, learn from your mistakes, and now we know a lot of key things to watch for while these are being installed, which is great. What's next for Ramsey, Washington and Target? I mentioned we're looking at the Target in Woodbury off Valley Creek Road. That store is the third Target in our district. It actually was the one we wanted to work on first, just given the drainage area and the opportunities out here, but it was a little bit more difficult because Target doesn't own that store. It's owned by a larger property management company. So we've had to work with them as well, and they're on board with everything. And we're in the early design phase right now. And then looking at construction in 2024. This parking lot, if anyone's ever been out there, our first meeting out here was on a Tuesday at like 10 a.m. or something, and the parking lot was packed, which is pretty common out here. There's a lot of other shopping centers, Starbucks, I think a couple other restaurants that get used. So out here, we most likely will not be able to take any parking. So we're looking at using more tree trenches and then probably have to get into some underground systems. But we're excited that by the time our final design happens, Target will have seen these tree trenches in place and how they function, and hopefully get some good feedback from their guests that they do support this and want to see them elsewhere. And then for Target, it's fun to see them. They've already taken what they've learned from us and expanded it to stores outside of our district. So looking at putting in tree trenches and giving up parking spaces for other filtration needs at stores around the metro, and hopefully eventually around the country, which is exactly what we want with our partnership programs. And that is it. So I will open it up. I'll probably stop sharing. Any questions you have for me or Chuck, I guess?
Great, thanks. Oh, go ahead, Chuck.
I've been answering a few questions in the chat.
Oh, good.
People have been making comments, so I've been answering a few of those in there.
Also,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, Nikolai wanted to know or would be interested in the construction docs. I think, Paige, you mentioned you would be willing to potentially share those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Nikolai, I don't know if you saw my email address, or I can put it in chat too for anybody. If you want to send me something and then I can send it to you.
Let's see, we had a specific question from Karen. How does mortality compare to traditional tree coffins?
I would say the mortality rate is definitely lower than the tree boxes or tree coffins. The tree trench allows for more root growth. It allows for more space. I don't have any numbers on the exact, but we've lost, out of all of ours, we've lost one tree out of 30 or 40 trees that we planted in these projects. So we're very selective when we put in, with the exception of City of Maplewood needed a maple tree. We're very clear about that many times. But I would say the mortality rate, we tend to go with, somebody said Kentucky coffee tree. We use that. We use a lot of swamp white. So we're not just putting in any tree. So we do a research on that. But definitely the coffee tree seems to be the strongest tree in all of these infrastructures, along with hackberry does surprisingly well. So I guess I'm not shocked by that.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. I don't know specific mortality numbers, but I would say we've seen better success. At first we were a little scared because of the mortality we saw at Maplewood Mall, but that was nothing to do with that was just install error. So we've seen really good success at the Target stores.
I think the mortality has more to do with the asphalt than it does the heat. The water that goes into these systems. If it's July and we get a downpour, I mean, that water's hitting these trees at 102 degrees. So we try to put a little bit of a buffer. And again, I keep going back to, I've answered a few questions. We try to get that sheet feeding so it's dispersed a little more and we get a little bit of cooling effect out of it. And my preference is always, let's take the rooftop runoff when we can, because that's substantially cooler coming off the white PVC roof than a black asphalt parking lot.
Yeah, I'd also be curious to see the growth rate in one of these systems compared to other ones. I wonder if things are growing faster. Dan Wattenhoffers has a question here. Have either of you worked with Silvacell type structures on city, county / state right-of-way projects? Curious if those sorts of structures qualify for federal infrastructure funding.
I have not. Chuck, I don't know if you have.
We've worked with the Silvacells, but never in the right of way. So I don't have an answer for if that would qualify for federal infrastructure funding. My gut says this probably not. It could turn into more of a headache for them if they have maintenance issues with it. So my gut would say no, but I don't have any experience in it. So
let's see. Steve Nicholson asks, has the 2 recent dry years affected establishment of some of the newer plantings? Without runoff, how did the trees survive?
Yes, good question. So usually we have like plans to water in place, but previously it had been so wet that apparently we all forgot that things get dry. So we had to rush last summer and get, we actually worked with Ramsey County Parks. They have a watering truck they use. So they were able to get out and water the trees and plants for us at both places. And we are set with them to water next year as well. Yeah, it's kind of a trial by error, I guess.
Yeah, that's the answer. We water them if they need watering, we go out and water them. All of our, Paige said Ramsey, Washington has a 2-year, all of our projects go out with a 3-year maintenance program, and that does include watering.
I had a question for Paige, thinking about the target projects. Is there any way to sort of get a sense of what the actual numbers are in regards to reduction in water
Yes.
or water managed?
Yeah, let me, I had that actually, but I hid that slide. So for, let's see, so for both stores, we had about 6 pounds of phosphorus removed per year, and then volume reduction, about 4,000 cubic feet. I don't really know that in other terms that would be useful to you, but we do have that. We keep track of it all. I don't have it ready, but we do have it broken down by what is treated by the tree trenches specifically and the rain gardens. If that's something anyone wants to see, we use the MIDS calculator from the PCA, the minimal impact design calculator, to keep track of all that. So we do have that broken down by practice. Yeah. And then I think someone else asked about funding. So both the North St. Paul store was about $1 million project, and North St. Paul, or no, I'm kidding, I might have said that wrong. East St. Paul was about 850,000, and then North St. Paul $1 million.
Thank you. Just as a quick side note, I did put a link for the ISA CEU. If you could fill out that form. If you're looking for an ISA CEU. Another question, a lot of folks here aren't necessarily in Ramsey County. Paige, do you know of other counties or watershed districts doing similar things that you are?
Yeah, you know, most metro watershed districts at least have a grant program, you know, to help with people. So if you approach your watershed district or even your soil and water district, they have grant funds available or can help apply for clean water fund grants. I don't think anyone else is doing this targeted approach that we are doing, where we go out and seek these opportunities. I've met with a lot of staff from other metro watersheds who are really excited about our program and want to learn more about it. But it is a matter of, you know, we're very fortunate that we have a supportive board who funds projects like this. Yeah.
Nice.
But always worth talking to. Watershed districts have various grant dollars available that they might just be holding on and waiting for the right project.
Nice. Maybe a question here for Chuck. And typically, what type of tree stock is used or was used? Container, B&B, bare root?
We've done it both. Mainly we use B&B. We've never done one with a bare root system. I would imagine that it would work, but again, almost, I would say 80% of it is B&B, and then we did one that was all container stock. So usually B&B is what we put in. I think Maplewood Mall was all container stock. I think they went in as like a number 10. When that went in, we didn't do the project, but we did bid on it, and that was a long time ago. But I think, weren't those all containers? Page on the initial.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, I think the containers probably would do better than the B&B stock, but we have clients who want instant impact, so they want, you know, a large tree now. So.
Yeah. And maybe this was mentioned and I missed it, but is there sort of, in terms of things like pruning and tree maintenance, and especially in like the Target situations, is there a plan for that? Does Target handle that after everything's installed and you just kind of say good luck?
Yeah. No, we have tried that good luck approach and it doesn't work. So we do have that all in place, and yeah, tree pruning, we know it will happen. I think there was a comment about the species we selected. Yeah, we know it will happen. We have that factored in, and actually one of the requirements of our maintenance contract, you know, the people we hire, they need to have an arborist or someone certified to do that, to know what to look for in tree maintenance. And then it's a recommendation in that operation and maintenance manual that we give to Target as we hand that over to them. You know, the other big things are well, obviously plant replacement within the gardens, but trash control out there. So that's one thing Target is responsible for now. And so they keep a good eye on that, but just making sure, especially in those tree grates, all the trash that blows around the parking lot gets pulled out. And those grates, they do get weedy, so they have to be weeded out as well.
Sure.
And Ryan, I see your question about, I think it's from Maria. She asked, you know, do we have any idea what made Target change their minds about parking spaces? And I honestly don't know. I think it was a factor of things. I'd like to say it was my influence, but I'm not sure it was. But I think it was their green infrastructure team talking with their, I can't remember his title, but he deals with parking lots. That's his sole job, is dealing with parking lots. You know, having those two talk, and then also talking with North St. Paul and the city of St. Paul to make, you know, learn about the new parking lot requirements. And they were both vastly oversized according to city code. So they were able to have that loss of parking without getting into any code issues. And I think even, you know, prior to 2020, they were just seeing an uptick in people doing online shopping. So people weren't hanging out in the parking lot as much. Even Black Friday deals have changed. So they weren't needing to manage for that parking as much.
Yeah, I'm in. I think Target and a lot of other retailers are shrinking their parking footprint. Target has these massive parking lots, and I mentioned parking code is changing in almost all cities. So Target is taking on some of their sites. Their new stores will have e-commerce pickup spots where you actually pull up underneath the canopy or whatever, and they'll load it for you. The other thing Target has, you know, in those parking lots, they may be separate pieces of real estate that now they're saying, okay, we don't need parking. We'll lease this space to, you know, McDonald's something. So they'll have an interior ring already designed into their projects, into their real estate, to add more revenue by leasing out space to a smaller retailer on the fringe of their parking lot. So, which is good. I mean, when we see some of the parking lots, it's nice that people are now using that for something besides just a sea of asphalt 360 days out of the year. So.
Well, with that, I think, oh, okay, there is a question here from Mike Baugh. Sorry if I missed this. What was the Watershed District percentage of cost share on these projects?
Yeah, I was actually just typing a response, so I'm glad you saw that one. So for East St. Paul, the Watershed District funded that entire project. And then North St. Paul, we funded a majority of it, and we were able to receive, it was a little under $100,000 in clean water fund grants that went to the North St. Paul store. And then Target will be responsible for maintenance. It's a 20-year maintenance agreement they sign. So they're committed to that for the next 20 years.
And the YMCA was 50% funded by the Watershed because it wasn't all stormwater related. And I give Hamlin Church credit. They funded theirs 100% out of pocket for that entire project. So the Capital Region Watershed gave them, I think, $10,000 on a $200,000 project. So they took it, but for me, it was 100% on them.
Well, great. Paige and Chuck, thanks so much. I think it's really beneficial to see these real world projects and just get a sense of what's actually happening out there, and just really appreciate you taking the time and presenting to the community here today.
Thanks for inviting us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So